Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Coalition ship Harmony's Edge and watched another defeat unfold on the main screen. 12 Coalition vessels fled from the Kepler system, while black Vorthak ships chased them like wolves hunting sheep. The retreat looked organized, but Jake knew better. This was a rout. "Pull back all units to safe distance," Admiral Zenth commanded through his translator device. The crystalline alien's voice came out flat and emotionless, but Jake could see the defeat in his rigid posture. Minimal casualties are the priority. Jake wanted to scream. Minimal casualties. That phrase had cost them 40 star systems in the past 5 years. The Coalition treated every battle like a training exercise where keeping soldiers alive mattered more than winning. The Vorthak did not share this view. General Vex of the insect-like Threx clicked his mandibles in what Jake had learned meant frustration. The enemy maintains superior firepower. Tactical withdrawal remains our best option. "We just lost 3 mining colonies and a shipyard," Jake said. His voice carried across the bridge, causing several alien officers to turn their multiple eyes toward him. "How is running away our best option?" Admiral Zenth's crystal form shifted colors, showing mild irritation. "Commander Morrison, your species joined the Coalition only 5 years ago. Perhaps you do not fully understand our methods." Jake understood perfectly. The Coalition had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through trade, diplomacy, and careful negotiation. When conflicts arose, they used measured force and always left room for their enemies to surrender. They fought wars like they were business disputes. The Vorthak were not interested in business. For 30 years, the black ships had moved across the galaxy like a disease. They did not want territory or resources. They wanted death. Every world they conquered became a graveyard. Every species they encountered faced complete extinction. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Sullivan whispered beside Jake. She was one of only 12 humans aboard the massive Coalition flagship. "The Proxima defense grid is requesting immediate reinforcement." Jake looked at the tactical display. Red markers showed Vorthak advance forces already surrounding the outer colonies of the Proxima system. In 6 hours, they would reach the main population centers. 50 million civilians lived there. "Admiral," Jake said, "we need to turn around and fight for Proxima." Zenth's crystal structure flashed angry orange. "Commander, the risk assessment clearly shows a 73% probability of fleet destruction if we engage the enemy force. Coalition. Doctrine requires withdrawal when casualty predictions exceed 60%. Coalition doctrine is why we keep losing," Jake replied. The bridge fell silent. Speaking against Coalition military philosophy was close to heresy. These aliens had created the most peaceful civilization in galactic history. They had ended war, hunger, and suffering across 12 species, but they had never faced anything like the Vorthak. Colonel Ryan Blake stepped forward from the human section of the bridge. As the senior human officer present, he outranked Jake. But the two men had fought together for 3 years. Blake understood what Jake was thinking. "Admiral Zenth," Blake said carefully, "humanity requests permission to take our ships to defend Proxima. Your 3 destroyers against a Vorthak battle group?" General Vex's translator made his laughter sound like grinding metal. "Commander, Blake, your courage is noted, but suicide serves no tactical purpose." Jake thought about the reports from occupied worlds. The Vorthak did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They killed everything that moved and then sterilized the planets from orbit. When Coalition rescue teams finally reached these dead worlds, they found nothing but ash and radiation. "Maybe suicide serves a purpose the Coalition doesn't understand," Jake said. This time, Admiral Zenth turned his full attention to the human. In Coalition culture, such direct challenge to authority was almost unthinkable. "Explain your meaning, Commander." Jake walked to the tactical display and pointed at the red markers. "The Vorthak advance because they know we will retreat. They plan their attacks around our predictable responses. What happens when we stop being predictable?" "You would sacrifice ships and lives for no tactical gain," Zenth replied. "No tactical gain?" Jake's voice rose. "Admiral, in 30 years of fighting, has the Coalition ever made the Vorthak pay a real price for their attacks? Have you ever made them afraid?" Captain Lisa Harper, Another human officer accessed her data pad. Sir, Coalition records show that Vorthak casualties in this sector total less than 200 ships over 5 years. They lose more vessels to mechanical failure than to our weapons. The alien officers exchanged glances. This was true, but no one had stated it so bluntly before. The Vorthak attack because it cost them nothing, Jake continued. They know we will run. They know we will not make them suffer for their victories. What if we change that? You speak of escalation, General Vex said. The Coalition has maintained galactic peace through measured response and proportional force. The Coalition is dying, Jake replied. At current loss rates, we have maybe 18 months before the Vorthak reach the core worlds. Your measured responses are not working. Admiral Zenth was quiet for a long moment. His crystal form shifted through several colors that Jake had learned indicated deep thought. Finally, he spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Commander Morrison? Jake looked around the bridge at the faces of aliens who had never known true war. They were good people, peaceful people, who believed that civilization meant avoiding barbarism at all costs. They could not imagine fighting the way the Vorthak fought. But humans could. Give us a chance, Jake said. One sector, one battle group. Let us show you what happens when someone fights the Vorthak the way they fight us. Your methods would violate Coalition warfare protocols, Zenth warned. Our methods might save the Coalition, Blake added. The Admiral's colors shifted again. Jake knew this conversation would continue in private among the Coalition leadership. They would debate and analyze and run probability calculations. Meanwhile, the Vorthak would destroy another world. But for the first time since joining this war, Jake felt something like hope. The aliens were starting to understand that their enemy could not be defeated with their rules. Soon they might be desperate enough to try humanity's rules instead. The emergency session of the Coalition Council took place in the largest chamber aboard New Harmony, the mobile capital ship. Representatives from 12 species filled the circular room with their various forms of communication. Crystalline beings hummed in harmonic frequencies, gas-form entities pulsed with colored light, and insectoid delegates clicked their limbs in complex patterns. Captain Lisa Harper stood in the center of the chamber, representing humanity's small delegation. Around her, alien forms towered above her human frame. The ethereal collective floated in shimmering clouds near the ceiling. The massive stone-like beings of the Foundation sat like living mountains along the walls. The proposal before us, announced High Counselor Thane, his thoughts translated into audible words, requests operational command authority for the human military contingent in Sector 7. This represents a significant departure from established Coalition doctrine. Murmurs of concern filled the chamber. The translation matrix worked overtime to convert dozens of alien languages into understandable speech. Most of it expressed doubt about human capabilities and methods. Admiral Chen Wei, humanity's senior military representative, activated his presentation display. Numbers and tactical maps appeared in holographic form above the chamber floor. Honored council members, I will be direct. The Coalition is losing this war. The chamber erupted. Species representatives voiced their objections in clicks, harmonics, and telepathic bursts. The very idea of defeat was foreign to beings who had known only peace and prosperity for millennia. Chen waited for quiet, then continued. Current casualty rates and territorial losses indicate complete Coalition collapse within 18 months. The Vorthak advance continues, despite our best defensive efforts. Elder Crix of the peaceful Helix Federation spoke through his biomechanical translator. Admiral Chen, the Coalition has maintained galactic stability for over 2,000 years. Our methods have prevented countless conflicts and preserved countless lives. Your methods work against rational opponents, Lisa replied. The Vorthak are not rational. They seek total extermination of all non-Vorthak life. They cannot be negotiated with, reasoned with, or deterred by traditional means. General Vex rose from his position among the Threx delegation. Human tactics, from what we have observed, involve excessive violence and disregard for casualty minimization. These approaches contradict fundamental Coalition principles. Lisa had expected this objection. General, with respect, your principles are getting everyone killed. The Centauri colonies fell last week. 40 million beings died because we followed evacuation protocols instead of fighting. The chamber fell silent. The loss of Centauri had shaken every species in the coalition. It was the largest population center to fall since the war began. What exactly do you propose? Asked Ambassador Quinn of the Aquatic Depth Dwellers. Lisa activated her own display. Star charts showed the Outer Rim territories, systems already under heavy Vorthak pressure. Give humanity full tactical command of these sectors. Allow us to implement our own operational procedures without coalition oversight or interference. Impossible, declared Speaker Yorith of the Mechanical Construct Assembly. Human military doctrine involves tactics that violate 17 separate coalition warfare conventions. Those conventions assume your enemy shares your values, Lisa replied. The Vorthak do not value life, honor agreements, or respect civilian populations. Fighting them with coalition rules is like trying to stop a virus with politeness. Chen stepped forward with more tactical data. In every engagement, coalition forces have maintained ethical standards while the Vorthak have employed unrestricted warfare. The result is predictable defeat. You speak of abandoning our civilization's core principles, High Counselor Thane responded. If we become like our enemies, what victory could possibly matter? A victory where someone survives to debate ethics? Lisa said bluntly. The human delegation had prepared for this moment. Colonel Ryan Blake accessed archived footage from recently fallen worlds. The holographic display showed the aftermath of Vorthak conquest. Dead cities, sterilized continents, orbital bombardment craters where populations' centers once stood. This is what happens when the Vorthak win, Blake said. They do not occupy territory. They do not enslave populations. They eliminate all life and move on. Every world they take becomes a monument to extinction. The images had their intended effect. Even species that had never known war understood what they were seeing. The Vorthak were not just another aggressive neighbor. They were an existential threat to all sentient life. Elder Kree spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of his 1,000-year lifespan. If we grant this request, what assurance do we have that human methods will prove more effective? None, Lisa admitted. But we have absolute assurance that current methods will fail. The mathematical projections are clear. Major Amy Sullivan presented the final piece of evidence. Council members, human military analysts have identified 43 tactical opportunities in the past year where aggressive action could have significantly damaged Vorthak forces. Coalition doctrine prevented exploitation of all 43 opportunities. You would have us fight without honor, said General Vex. We would have you fight to win, Lisa replied. The debate continued for hours. Species representatives argued about ethics, principles, and the nature of civilization itself. The humans listened patiently, knowing that desperation would eventually overcome philosophy. Finally, Admiral Zenth requested a private consultation with his fellow military commanders. The chamber cleared except for senior officers from each species' military forces. Speak honestly, Zenth said once the politicians were gone. Can we win this war with current tactics? The silence that followed was answer enough. General Vex was the first to speak. Probability calculations indicate progressive deterioration of our strategic position. Victory through conventional means appears unlikely. The humans claim they can change this outcome, Admiral Korth of the Star Shepherd said, but their methods are barbaric by our standards. Barbarism that might preserve civilization, Chen replied. The Vorthak respect only one thing: superior violence. We need to speak their language. The military leaders debated for another hour before reaching their conclusion. When the full council reconvened, Elder Crix announced the decision. The Coalition grants humanity operational command of Outer Rim Sectors 7 through 12. Human forces will operate under their own tactical doctrine for a trial period of 6 months. Success will be measured by territorial retention and enemy casualties inflicted. Lisa felt a mixture of relief and dread. They had gotten what they asked for, but now they had to deliver results. Thank you, honored council. We will not waste this opportunity. See that you do not, High Counselor Thane warned. The Coalition will be watching closely. Any violation of basic sentient rights or excessive cruelty will result in immediate termination of this arrangement. As the council session ended and representatives dispersed, Lisa met with her fellow human officers. They had 6 months to prove that humanity's darker nature could save the galaxy. Colonel Blake summarized their situation perfectly. We just got permission to fight the first real war this galaxy has seen in 2,000 years. God help us all. Captain Tony Rivera studied the tactical display showing the Titan Nebula system. 3 Vorthak monitoring stations hung in space like metal spiders, their sensor arrays tracking every Coalition movement in the sector. For 8 months, these stations had guided Vorthak raids against supply convoys and refugee ships. Previous Coalition attempts to neutralize these targets? Rivera asked his intelligence officer. Lieutenant Carl Brooks consulted his datapad. 7 operations over the past year. Each time, Coalition forces broadcast surrender demands and provided evacuation windows. The Vorthak simply reinforced their positions during the delays. Rivera nodded. Coalition warfare doctrine required giving enemies multiple opportunities to surrender before engaging. It was civilized, honorable, and completely useless against an enemy that never surrendered. Time to change the rules, Rivera said. The human task force consisted of 2 destroyers and 30 Marines aboard modified assault shuttles. By Coalition standards, it was a tiny force attacking a hardened target. By human standards, it was more than enough. Rivera's ship, the Defiant, dropped out of jump space directly beside the largest monitoring station. The Vorthak had 17 seconds to react before human weapons began firing. No warnings, no surrender demands, Rivera told his weapons officer. Just kill everything that moves. The first monitoring station died in a storm of missile strikes and energy beams. Its crew of 40 Vorthak warriors never had time to send a distress signal. The second station managed to launch fighters before Sergeant Katie Miller's Marines boarded it through breached airlocks. Clear the station room by room, Miller ordered her squad. No prisoners. The Coalition rules of engagement specifically prohibited executing wounded enemies or non-combatants. Human rules were simpler. Anything that was not human was a target. Miller's team moved through the station's corridors like a hunting pack. They used explosives instead of careful room-clearing procedures. They shot wounded Vorthak instead of providing medical aid. When they found the station's communication center, they downloaded all data files before destroying the equipment. The third monitoring station tried to flee. Its crew had seen what happened to the other 2 positions and attempted to retreat deeper into the nebula. Captain Sarah Williams, commanding the destroyer Relentless, pursued them. Ram them, Williams ordered when her weapons proved insufficient to stop the fleeing station. Her crew stared at her in shock. Ramming attacks were considered suicide tactics, abandoned by civilized warfare centuries ago. Ma'am, collision will destroy both vessels, her navigation officer reported. Execute the order, Williams replied. The Relentless accelerated toward the Vorthak station at maximum velocity. At the last moment, Williams and her bridge crew evacuated to escape pods, while the ship's autopilot completed the ramming maneuver. Both vessels died in nuclear fire, but the Vorthak monitoring network was eliminated. News of the Titan Nebula operation spread quickly through both Coalition and Vorthak communication networks. Coalition observers were horrified by footage showing human soldiers executing wounded enemies and destroying captured equipment instead of studying it for intelligence value. Admiral Zenth reviewed the battle reports with growing discomfort. Commander Morrison, your forces violated at least 12 Coalition warfare conventions during this operation. Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room aboard the human command ship Vengeance, surrounded by alien officers who looked at him like he was a dangerous animal. Sir, our forces eliminated 3 Vorthak positions that had survived 8 Coalition attacks. We achieved total mission success with minimal human casualties. By abandoning all principles of civilized warfare, General Vex added. The Vorthak do not fight civilized warfare, Jake replied. They fight to exterminate everything that lives, Responding with civilization gets you dead. The alien officers remained unconvinced, but they could not argue with results. For the first time since the war began, a Vorthak position had been completely eliminated without enemy survivors to report human tactics and capabilities. Major Dan Carter was leading similar operations throughout the Outer Rim. His ground forces on Kepler Prime faced a Vorthak landing attempt with tactics that shocked Coalition observers. Instead of establishing defensive positions and waiting for the enemy to attack, Carter's troops struck first. Hit them while they are still in their landing craft, Carter ordered. No defensive positions, no prepared lines, just attack. Human. Marines used suicide bombers, biological weapons, and chemical explosives banned by Coalition law. They targeted Vorthak supply lines, communication centers, and medical facilities. When Vorthak forces tried to establish a base camp, Carter's troops poisoned their water supply and mined their landing zones. The Vorthak ground commander, used to fighting defensive Coalition forces, found himself facing an enemy that attacked constantly and accepted any level of casualties to inflict damage. His troops, bred for conquest against civilized opponents, began showing signs of stress and confusion. Captain Pete Johnson commanded the destroyer Independence in the outer edge of the sector. When Vorthak raiders attacked a civilian transport convoy, Johnson's response violated every principle of Coalition military doctrine. Use the civilian ships as cover, Johnson ordered. Put our guns between the transports and approach the enemy vessels. His tactical officer protested. Sir, that puts civilian lives at risk if we take fire. The civilians are already dead if we lose this fight, Johnson replied. Better some risk than certain death. Johnson's destroyer used the transport ships to mask its approach, then emerged at point-blank range to engage the Vorthak raiders. When one raider attempted to escape, Johnson pursued it directly into an asteroid field where Coalition ships were not supposed to operate. Sir, navigation through this field exceeds safe parameters, his pilot reported. Follow that ship, Johnson ordered. If it goes to hell, we go to hell. The chase ended when both vessels collided with asteroids and exploded. Johnson and his crew died, but they took the Vorthak raider with them and saved the civilian convoy. Reports of human operations began reaching Vorthak command levels. For 30 years, the Vorthak had faced opponents who valued their own lives above victory. They had developed tactics based on exploiting Coalition reluctance to accept casualties. Humans changed that equation completely. Commander Lisa Harper reviewed intelligence reports from captured Vorthak equipment. They are having trouble adapting to our methods, she told the human command staff. Their tactical doctrine assumes rational opponents who will retreat when faced with superior force. We are not rational by their standards, Colonel Blake agreed. We fight like they fight, but with better technology and tactical flexibility. The early results were promising, but they came at a terrible cost. Human casualty rates in the Outer Rim exceeded 60% in most operations. Entire units were being wiped out to achieve objectives that Coalition forces would have abandoned as too costly. How long can we sustain these losses? Major Sullivan asked during a strategy meeting. As long as necessary, Jake replied. The Coalition has millions of people across hundreds of worlds. We have enough soldiers to keep fighting this way for years if needed. And if we run out of soldiers? Jake looked at the tactical display showing slow but steady progress against Vorthak positions. For the first time since the war began, red markers were disappearing from Coalition territory. Then at least we will have shown the galaxy how to win, he said. The Vorthak War Prime floated in its command chamber deep within the Death Forge, studying reports that disturbed its ancient intelligence. For 1,000,000 years, it had conquered galaxies using predictable patterns. Identify civilized species, exploit their weaknesses, eliminate their populations, move forward. The process never varied because it never needed to vary. These humans were different. Destroyer Lord Vash, the War Prime communicated through biomechanical links, explained the failure at Proxima Station. Vash, a veteran of countless campaigns, shifted uncomfortably in his command harness. War Prime, the humans did not behave according to established patterns. When surrounded and offered terms of surrender, They destroyed their own installation rather than negotiate. Acceptable. Desperate species sometimes choose death over slavery. Continue. They took 2 of our destroyers with them. War Prime. The explosion was deliberately calculated to maximize damage to our forces. The War Prime processed this information. In its vast experience, species chose suicide to avoid capture, not to inflict casualties on their captors. This suggested a different type of motivation. Show me the tactical recordings. The War Prime commanded. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing the final moments of Proxima Station. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos stood on the command deck as Vorthak forces surrounded her position. Instead of the fear or desperation the War Prime expected to see, the human female showed something else. Satisfaction. This is Maria Santos, commanding Proxima Defense Station, her final transmission declared. To any coalition forces receiving this message, the price of taking human positions is now established. We will not die alone. The station's reactor exploded with enough force to vaporize 2 Vorthak destroyers and damage 3 others. The War Prime studied the blast pattern and realized the humans had modified their reactor specifically to create maximum enemy casualties. They planned this, the War Prime said. Before the battle began, they prepared to die in a way that would hurt us most. Yes, War Prime. Similar patterns have emerged across 17 engagement zones. Human forces do not retreat when overwhelmed. They do not surrender when surrounded. They weaponize their own deaths. The War Prime had encountered species that fought to the last soldier. It had faced enemies who preferred death to defeat, but it had never seen an enemy that actively sought ways to make their deaths as costly as possible for the Vorthak. What casualties have these tactics inflicted? Destroyer Lord Vash consulted his battle reports with reluctance. Combined losses across all human sectors now exceed 400 vessels and 50,000 warriors, War Prime. This represents more casualties than we have suffered in the previous 10 years of coalition warfare. The number was significant. The Vorthak had infinite patience and vast resources, but they had never faced sustained losses against such a small enemy force. Human military strength consisted of fewer than 200 ships and 100,000 soldiers. They should have been eliminated in the first week of serious fighting. Instead, they were killing Vorthak forces at an unprecedented rate. Analysis. Why do human tactics prove effective against our standard responses? They violate all rational battlefield behavior, War Prime. They attack when they should retreat. They accept certain death to achieve minimal tactical gains. They treat their own lives as expendable weapons. The War Prime reviewed additional battle footage. On Kepler Prime, Major Dan Carter's ground, forces had rigged the planet's atmosphere processors with explosives. When Vorthak troops overran their positions, the humans detonated the processors, creating a toxic wasteland that denied the planet to any future occupation. They destroyed their own world rather than let us have it, the War Prime observed. Correct, War Prime. They show no interest in preserving infrastructure, civilian populations, or strategic resources. They fight only to inflict maximum damage on our forces. Captain Nancy Wright's squadron provided another example. When outnumbered 3-1 near the outer rim, Wright had ordered a coordinated ramming attack that destroyed her entire squadron, but crippled the Vorthak command ship and scattered the enemy fleet. These humans fight like Vorthak, the War Prime concluded. But with technological capabilities we did not expect and tactical creativity that exceeds our combat models. This was the problem. Vorthak battle doctrine assumed that advanced civilizations would value self-preservation above military objectives. The coalition had confirmed this assumption for 30 years. They retreated to save lives, negotiated to avoid casualties, and consistently chose survival over victory. Humans made the opposite choice in every engagement. Destroyer Lord Vash, implement Protocol 7 across all human sectors. Vash hesitated. Protocol 7 had not been used in 50,000 years. It was reserved for enemies that posed existential threats to Vorthak expansion. War Prime. Protocol 7 authorizes unlimited resource commitment and total warfare doctrine. The humans are a minor species with minimal territory. The humans are teaching other coalition species new methods of warfare, the War Prime replied. Intelligence indicates that Threk's ground forces have begun adopting human tactical approaches. Crystalline naval units have started using ramming. Attacks. The infection spreads. This was the real danger. For 1,000,000 years, the Vorthak had relied on their enemies fighting in predictable, civilized ways. If the entire coalition learned to fight like humans, the war would become much more difficult and costly. Deploy 3 full battle fleets to human sectors, the War Prime commanded. Eliminate all human military assets and occupied worlds. Accept any level of casualties necessary to achieve total extermination. War Prime. 3 battle fleets represent 75% of our available forces in this galaxy. Such commitment against a minor enemy seems excessive. The War Prime displayed tactical projections, showing potential outcomes if human methods spread throughout the coalition. Instead of quick victory and minimal losses, the war could drag on for decades with massive casualties on both sides. The humans must be eliminated before other species fully adopt their methods, the War Prime decided. If we fail to contain this threat, the entire galactic campaign becomes uncertain. 3 battle fleets began moving toward human space, carrying enough firepower to sterilize 50 worlds. The War Prime expected this overwhelming force to crush human resistance within weeks. But intelligence reports continued arriving that suggested the humans were still changing their tactics. Instead of concentrating their forces for final battles, they were dispersing into smaller units and adopting what their military called total warfare protocols. Commander Jake Morrison's latest transmission to Coalition headquarters provided disturbing insight into human intentions. To all Coalition forces, if human territories fall, we will implement scorched earth doctrine across all sectors. No world, no facility, no resource will be left intact for enemy use. The Vorthak will inherit ash and radiation. The War Prime studied this message with growing concern. The humans were not planning to lose gloriously in final battles. They were planning to make their entire region of space useless to the Vorthak, even if it meant destroying everything they had spent centuries building. For the first time in its 1,000,000-year existence, the War Prime began to understand what its enemies meant when they spoke of fear. Admiral Chen Wei stood before the largest gathering of human military personnel since the war began. The hangar bay of the command ship Vengeance held every available soldier, pilot, and officer from the scattered human fleet. Their faces showed the exhaustion of 18 months of constant fighting, but their eyes held something the Coalition had never seen before: the certainty of victory through sacrifice. Intelligence has located the Death Forge, Chen announced without ceremony. The Vorthak primary command facility is hidden in the collapsed Omega Centauri system, protected by gravitational weapons and defended by the equivalent of 50 fleet groups. The assembled humans listened in silence. They understood what these numbers meant. 50 fleet groups represented more firepower than the entire Coalition military possessed. It was a fortress that could not be taken by conventional assault. Captain Scott Adams raised his hand. Sir, what are our available forces for this operation? 12 destroyers, 43 attack ships, and 6,000 Marines, Chen replied. Every human vessel and soldier still capable of fighting. The mathematics were clear to everyone present. They were planning to attack the most heavily defended position in the galaxy with a force smaller than what the Coalition would normally use to escort supply convoys. Sir, Major Kevin Foster said, this is a suicide mission. Yes, Chen agreed. Any questions? No one spoke. They had all volunteered for this war knowing that human tactics required accepting death as an acceptable outcome. The only difference now was the scale of the sacrifice. Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Boyd stepped forward. Admiral, what is the mission objective? Are we trying to capture the Death Forge or gather intelligence on Vorthak command capabilities? We are going to destroy it completely, Chen said. Every Vorthak in that facility, every computer system, every communication relay. When we are done, the Death Forge will be debris and radiation. Sergeant Katie Miller, one of the few survivors from the early operations, asked the question everyone was thinking. Sir, How do we get close enough to plant charges when they have 50 fleet groups protecting them? Chen activated the tactical display showing the Omega Centauri system. The Death Forge appeared as a massive artificial construct orbiting the collapsed star, its defensive positions marked in red across multiple layers of protection. We do not sneak past their defenses, Chen explained. We attack them directly and keep attacking until we reach the target. This is not a stealth mission or a surgical strike. This is total warfare. Colonel Ryan Blake studied the assault plan with professional interest. Admiral, casualty projections for this approach indicate 100% human losses. Correct, Chen replied. But intelligence analysis suggests that destroying the Death Forge will cripple Vorthak operations across the entire galaxy. Their command structure depends on centralized control from this facility. Captain Lisa Harper accessed her datapad to review the intelligence reports. Sir, even if we succeed, none of us will survive to see the results. The Coalition will see the results, Chen said. Other human populations throughout the galaxy will see the results. The Vorthak will see the results. The plan was elegantly simple in its brutality. Human forces would assault the Death Forge defenses in waves, each group fighting until completely destroyed while the next group used their sacrifice to advance closer to the target. No retreat, no regrouping, no preservation of forces for future operations. Captain Tony Rivera volunteered to lead the first wave. His squadron would attack the outer defensive grid and fight until destroyed, creating gaps in the Vorthak formations for the second wave to exploit. How long do you need us to hold their attention? Rivera asked. As long as possible, Chen replied. Every minute you keep their defenses focused on you is another minute for the assault teams to advance. Major Dan Carter would command the ground assault once they reached the Death Forge structure. His Marines would board the facility and fight their way to the central reactor complex, where they would detonate enough explosives to destroy the entire construct. Sir, Carter said, our demolitions experts calculate that the explosion required to destroy a facility this size will vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. Understood, Chen replied. Are there any other questions about the mission parameters? Captain Sarah Williams, who had survived the ramming of her previous ship, asked the final question. Admiral, what message do we send to Coalition headquarters before we begin the assault? Chen had prepared for this moment. The last communication from human forces would need to explain their sacrifice in terms the Coalition could understand. Tell them that victory was impossible until humanity chose to make it inevitable, Chen said. Tell them that sometimes the only way to save civilization is to abandon civilized methods. Tell them that the price of freedom is always paid in blood, but the payment is always worth making. The assault began 12 hours later. Captain Rivera's squadron dropped out of jump space directly into the Death Forge defensive grid and immediately opened fire on the nearest Vorthak positions. They knew they would not survive the engagement, so they focused entirely on inflicting maximum damage in minimum time. Rivera's destroyer Defiant rammed a Vorthak battleship while his fighters conducted suicide attacks against communication arrays and sensor installations. The entire first wave was destroyed within 30 minutes, but they created enough chaos for the second wave to advance deeper into the defensive perimeter. Captain Williams led the second assault group in a coordinated attack on the middle defensive ring. Her ships used the debris from the first wave as cover, emerging from the wreckage to launch point-blank attacks on Vorthak command vessels. The pattern continued for 6 hours. Each human wave was completely destroyed, but each wave advanced closer to the Death Forge itself. Vorthak defenders found themselves facing an enemy that accepted annihilation as the cost of progress. Major Carter's assault shuttles reached the Death Forge superstructure during the final attack wave. His Marines boarded the facility through breached airlocks and began fighting through corridors filled with Vorthak defenders. No prisoners, no mercy, no retreat. Carter ordered his troops. We are here to destroy this place, not to survive. The Marines advanced through the Death Forge like a controlled explosion, destroying everything in their path and accepting any casualties necessary to maintain forward momentum. They reached the central reactor complex after 3 hours of constant fighting. Sir, Sergeant Foster reported, we have access to the primary reactor systems. Explosive charges are in position. Carter looked around at the dozen Marines still alive from his original force of 400. They had fought through the most heavily defended facility in Vorthak space and reached their objective. Now came the final moment. Detonate all charges simultaneously, Carter ordered. Maximum yield. Sir, the explosion will destroy the entire facility and everything within 50 kilometers. Execute the order, Carter replied. The Death Forge died in nuclear fire that could be seen from neighboring star systems. The explosion destroyed not only the facility itself, but also the surrounding Vorthak fleet groups that had been defending it. In a single moment, the Vorthak lost their primary command center and 75% of their available forces in the galaxy. The shockwave of the destruction reached Vorthak positions throughout the galaxy within hours. Without central coordination, their fleets began falling back to defensive positions. Their million-year advance stopped completely. Admiral Zenth received the final transmission from human forces just before the Death Forge exploded. Admiral Shen's last words were broadcast across the entire Coalition fleet. To our alien allies, we have shown you the price of victory. The galaxy is yours to save or lose. Do not waste what we have given you. The Coalition Council met in emergency session 3 days later to plan their first major offensive in 30 years. For the first time since the war began, they had the initiative. The Vorthak were retreating, their forces scattered and uncoordinated. But the victory had come at a price that would forever change how the galaxy viewed both war and humanity. An entire species had sacrificed itself to break an unbeatable enemy. They had proven that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization was to abandon civilized methods. Elder Crick spoke for the entire coalition when he delivered the memorial address for humanity's sacrifice. They showed us that victory was impossible until someone was willing to pay any price to make it possible. We will remember their gift and try to prove worthy of it. The war continued for another year, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Coalition had learned humanity's lessons about total warfare and applied them with alien efficiency and resources. The Vorthak, facing enemies who now fought like humans but with the combined strength of 12 species, found themselves overwhelmed. When the final Vorthak stronghold fell, the Coalition erected a monument in the space where the Death Forge had been destroyed. The inscription was simple. Here humanity taught the galaxy that sometimes the greatest victory requires the ultimate sacrifice.